I'm going to pause here, and I'm just going to reiterate why I'm saying this, because a lot of this might be redundant, and it might just be, just hearing these articles, it's probably very difficult for people, but it's a lot of good information. For hardcore Bond fans, if you're not a hardcore Bond fan, you're probably not going to enjoy this. But the reason I'm doing this is to show and to prove to you what the mindset behind the creators, the producers, the directors, the writers of these films is all about. That and kind of get behind their thoughts and their mind on who Bond is, and just kind of get rid of these theories of these silly theories of Time Lord and Codename and all that stuff. And this is how you prove it. So the next quote or interview we have is from the BBC. It's a documentary called Looking for Mr. Bond, 007. And it was in 2015, I believe. And this is a quote by Daniel Craig. He says, "I want to make the best film we can, the most entertaining film we can, and it's not a question of redefining, but a question of taking it somewhere, maybe where it's never gone before." And the narrator before that mentions that Craig is taking Bond back to the books. So even Craig here is saying, we're not redefining Bond. We're just doing things that we've never done with him before. Okay, now there is a second interview with Martin Campbell. And this one really kind of gets to the heart of what I'm talking about. It was in January 27th of 2010. His interview was given to him by Reel's channel. And the first thing he says is timing was more important on both movies, and he's speaking about Casino Royale and GoldenEye. With GoldenEye, it would be greeted as a complete revival of the series. So he's not calling them reboots. He's calling them like a revival, because Bond was dying at that time. He hadn't been on for 5 years, and then he got fantastical, like Barbara said in one of the earlier interviews. And so Casino Royale had to be a revival also. Then Martin Campbell says, "We even discussed doing it," speaking of Casino Royale, "as a period piece." And he's, basically they didn't wind up doing that. This kind of shows that they weren't considering a new character. They were considering it as, going back that far. But they decided against it. And the interviewer says, "The key to Campbell's interest in returning to Bond was the prospect of an origin story." And then he explained to Reel's channel, and this is Campbell speaking, "Casino Royale, of course, was an opportunity to go back to the tone of the books. I was lucky enough to have an origin story." And then lastly, he says, "Bond really doesn't become Bond until the last frame of the movie." So Casino Royale is the development of the character James Bond from the beginning, which we hadn't seen up until the point of Casino Royale. And it was to show us how Bond became the Bond we knew, or we know, in the previous films. Not a new Bond, but an expanded Bond. So with that said, Bond wasn't supposed to be a period piece, but rather a current trend in bringing Bond back to the 50s with Casino Royale would have caused him to lose his impact on our current culture. And so too, this mindset shows us his rebooting is actually a returning to the beginning while keeping with current styles. And then this causes the first four films that I mentioned to be the origin pieces. And this updating shows that Bond isn't meant to be a 50-year time frame, but rather a 20 to 30-year time frame of the same character within his career. In fact, nowhere do the directors, producers, writers, creators mention reboot in these interviews. I've read these articles and they don't say it. The article interviewers say it, but they aren't the authority on the films. The producers are. The family is, the franchise is. They're not part of the franchise. Also, their definition isn't one of meaning multiple Bonds, but rather a starting over, or more accurately, going back to the beginning, or a fresh take on the same character. The creators of the films, I think Barbara and Michael, I think they enjoy the suspense, of fans, being, is Bond a Codename, or is he the same guy all the time? And, they're probably not going to completely come right out and say it totally, because it's like, why ruin it? Why unveil the mystery? But the other thing is why has this reboot, this concept kind of morphed into a strange concept of meaning multiple Bonds, or Bond's a code name, or we're starting a whole new timeline. And I think it's because it's just popular with movies nowadays. Like, everyone's doing it. Like, we see all these different franchises of Batman, of, the DC and Marvel. And so it's kind of taken root, and people are interpreting that into every single film. I mean, we wouldn't say it about Star Wars. We wouldn't say it about Lord of the Rings. So, I mean, why would we say it about Bond? I mean, it's just not factual. And another thing is I think a lot of the fans that hold to this idea are either fans who haven't watched all the films, or fans who haven't watched them that many times. Maybe they saw The Man with the Golden Gun one time, or On Her Majesty's Secret Service 2 times. And so they don't have a huge familiarity with how all those other films fit in. So, a more accurate parallel would be based in just different franchises. If, like you take the Nolan Batman and versus the Burton Batman. I mean, they're from different universes, but also they're from different franchises. The same thing, you could parallel that with Bond, where all of EON is the same James Bond, but then you have two other franchises that did Bond movies. You had Kevin McClory, who he did his Never Say Never Again, and then you have Charles Feldman, who did his Casino Royale spoof in 1967, and then you have the CBS hour-long TV film Casino Royale in 1954. Like, all those, I mean, that's 4 different franchises right there. So if you want to carry that idea on, you can do that with the separating the franchises. But I just don't think it works with the one franchise, the EON Productions franchise. All the films made by them So in kind of closing this up, Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre, they're origin pieces. And you know what? They're prequels too, but prequel, I mean, it's another name for it, but, you know, prequel has a negative connotation with people for some reason. I don't know why they don't like it. It doesn't have that with me, but so I just change it to origin pieces so that it, you know, it sounds better. This then draws us into, you know, the history of the films and how that affects this origin piece concept, specifically with these first four, Thunderball and Dr. No. We've already seen in the previous interviews that Barbara, Michael, and Campbell draw their motivation from the history and desires of the franchise. And let me suggest to you all that the reason for expanding the James Bond character is threefold. One, they wanted an in-depth, multi-tiered character to better identify with today's audience. Two, they wanted to show his background and how he came to be, and they couldn't do it prior. Because they didn't have ownership of just particular rights of characters and, you know, screenplays, etc. And this is just my speculation.